That question. 5 minutes. Yes. Right.
kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, I'm no kwa Osinachi. One lemon Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi.
Hi Stella. Ellie here. Can you hear me? Mr. Ebenezer Olamiposi, who is the chair of the panel, is in as an attendee, and he needs to be upgraded as the panelist for this presentation. Can you guys help out? Yes. Okay. Did you get that? Yes, I did. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Kosi, I think they're fixing it. Thank you. All right, thank you. Another file is killing. Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear us too?
Yes.
Okay, so can let us know when we can start, please.
Yes. Yeah, don't worry, when you
What did you say?
No, never mind. Okay, the thing is, Stella Oyekomi is supposed to start first, but PowerPoint is still coming in. So we can move on to somebody else or to the next person. Did you get that? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I said Stella Oyekomi is supposed to present first according to the program, but our PowerPoint is still coming in. So I don't have it yet. So we can maybe move on to the next person.
Okay. So because the second person
is in the room.
The second person is supposed to. Yes, she's also in. Do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so maybe if you have a presentation, are you okay starting the presentation for us, Mrs. Abraham?
So can you see my screen?
Yes. So before you start, can you all hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, so just a brief word to welcome everybody to the second part of this panel, Infrastructure Studies in Africa. Sorry, we are starting very much behind schedule because of technical glitches here and there, but I will want for us to launch into the presentations proper so that we give the panelists the opportunity to have their time to present their incredible works. And then, so the way it's going to go today is each presenter, because of our time now, because I think we've lost about 10 minutes. So if you could please reduce your presentation to about 10 to 12 minutes, there'll be a hard stop on 12 minutes. And for people who are joining on Zoom, I'll message you privately to let you know how much time you have left. For people in the audience who are sitting beautifully in the room in Lagos, please, I will, once you see my hand gesture like this, please know that you should be rounding up, and at some point I will also be cutting into sort of to tell you, oh, you have 5 minutes, you have this kind. So please just at the end of every presentation, we have a general question and answer. So without further ado, again, thank you all for attending today. Can we move on to the first presentation for today? So, like I said, please limit it to about 10 to 12 minutes because of time. Our time is fast spent. So I started your timer now.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of my presentation this evening is the impact inequality, poverty, and inadequate access to infrastructure on female migrants in the hospitality industry. My name is Fred. Well, this research is an independent research, and it's under our institution. It's an NGO, Strategic Generation Development Initiative. And this idea came up as a result of some of the things we do. We essentially reached out to young people from different walks of life. And during our work, we found that there are a number of young people who have migrated to Lagos because of infrastructure, number one, and a better life. So let me quickly read through the abstract before I dive into discourse. Next slide, please. Okay. Female migrants working in the hospitality industry in Lagos face systemic marginalization, exploitation, and denial of their rights in the workplace. This ethnographic study examines the operations of hospitality outlets in Lagos, particularly those owned by foreign nationals, such as Lebanese, Chinese, Italian entrepreneurs. Nigeria ranks among the lowest globally in terms of infrastructure, and in Lagos, the need of affordable housing, transportation, and healthcare is particularly alarming. Many female migrants in the hospitality sector who are often without access to these essential services suffer from these deficiencies. Next slide, please. So in this research, it's essentially an ethnographic research. Here you can see two hospitality outlets. The first one to my left is Bobo, that's the entrance to Bobo, and that's Rhapsody's Ikeja. And it's purely ethnographic and it is anthropology. Now, one of the things that differentiates anthropology from many other disciplines is the fact that we often focus on the aspect that most disciplines will overlook. You know, many disciplines will think some things are not essential, but as anthropologists, we often focus on this aspect. So we'll be looking at the hospitality industry itself, migrant infrastructure, poverty, and failure. Next slide, please. I'm running because of our time. Now, the overview. This study focused on the food and beverage industry, mainly restaurants, bars, lounges, nightclubs in Lagos Island and mainland. And this is because hospitality is such a labor-intensive industry. And this segment continually springs up at various locations of the state and are often in need of services of these female migrants. Next slide, please. Introduction. The main reason why we're having this research is to address the aspect of spatial inequalities, constrained development, and equal access to infrastructure, frequently obscured by continued manifestation of poverty. It has served as a significant push to migration, and that is what we have observed. People tend to migrate or want to migrate not just because they want to change the location, they essentially want to change their life. They want to improve on their lives, and that's one of the things that we have found as we dive into this research. Next, please. Now, the aspect of migration has begun in the last few years, let's say 10 years or more. Of course, there have been lots and lots of migration, but since political insurgency, but then religious crisis, and many other things are affecting people of Nigeria, especially the northeast, southeast Nigeria. You find youth, young people looking into Lagos in order to find a better life. For instance, when we talk about migration, a typical Nigerian will always think about Lagos. That's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about migration. And that has been what is happening. And again, as I get into this research, I realized that majority of the families of these young people believe that as soon as they get into Lagos, as their footsteps on the soil of Lagos, it's like getting into heaven or the promised land. When you walk in the street of gold and you have everything you're looking for. But the reality is not so. For instance, the former Lagos State Governor, Mr. Akinwumi Ambode, reported in 2017 that 86 migrants enter Lagos every hour with no plan to leave. And this statistics is the highest in the world. This is Vanguard News 2017, and this is relatively an old statistics. It means that in 2025, it might have even quadrupled. Next, please. And I'm going to show you. So, female migrants. Let me quickly just touch a bit on this female migrants while I move to the next slide. Many female migrants live in informal settlements without access to clean water or safe roads, making it difficult to commit to work and increasing their vulnerability to violence and exploitation. According to International Labour Organization, the combination of infrastructure deficits and gender labor practices entrenches poverty cycle and diminishes the capacity of women to attain economic mobility. And the truth is, one of the things I also discovered is that women are disadvantaged, totally disadvantaged. As an anthropologist, we discovered that, like, for instance, their economic background and even gender sometimes will serve as a disadvantage. And that has been the typical experience in the hospitality industry. Next slide, please. Now, the dynamics of operations in the hospitality industry. Let me talk a bit on the dynamics of operation of the hospitality industry. Now, just like I mentioned, this research critically examines the complex dynamics of hospitality industry in Lagos, Nigeria, with particular focus on the lived experience of these female migrants. It's their lived experience that I focused on, and then a few of the aspects that I investigated: gender roles, economic survival, labor mobility, structural inequalities, and continued poverty. And then I looked at the aspect of infrastructure. Please, next slide, like the portion where we talked about infrastructure. Okay, please scroll. Okay, let me just go ahead to that question. In the emerging economies like Nigeria, infrastructure is a critical enabler for sustainable development in the hospitality industry. But very quickly, let me talk about infrastructure in the 21st century. Indeed, of course, infrastructure in the 21st century has expanded significantly. Now, according to Yen et al. 2022, successful economies with robust entrepreneurial ecosystem has now built infrastructure beyond the physical system to include information network, converged infrastructure such as integrated transport and digital services, and innovation infrastructure that supports research, education, and enterprise. For instance, in China, the infrastructure we are talking about here in this research is mainly all the physical things that should be put in place. But in a place like China, this is no longer seen as infrastructure. Unfortunately, such a progressive shift in infrastructure is yet to be widely implemented in Nigeria. And that is what is going on in the hospitality industry. Please, the next slide. Okay, this photo is just the bar area of Bogo. Bogo is an hospitality outlet on the Lagos Island. Although if you pass through Bogo, we wouldn't see the signpost or anything that looks like that. But when you get in, you will find that something is going on there. And the reason is because majority of this foreign investors, foreign entrepreneurs have seen the loopholes in Nigeria. They have seen the corruption and they have seen the system, and somehow they are leveraging on all of these loopholes to make a living for themselves rather than the people of the nation, especially the indigenous female migrants who work in this industry. Let me quickly talk about the story of Chizoba. Chizoba is the lady that...
Miss, if you can hear me, you have about 2-3 minutes more, please, if you can
Okay, yes, I will quickly round up now. Yes, so majority of the hospitality industry do not remunerate their workers, especially the indigenous worker, well. The reason is because they believe that when people come in, they could rely or depend on tipping. But during these interviews, we found that tipping, the assumption of tipping has really failed. The reason is because it is not certain. Tipping would come mainly as a result of perhaps the generosity of the customer. It shouldn't be a reason to not pay the people who do this work, who make the industry to run effectively well. Now, the conclusion of this research, due to time, I might not be able to say much. The conclusion actually here is that this research in itself is still ongoing, and the results are still in progress. Therefore, the results remain inconclusive. However, the preliminary findings indicate significant pattern of inequality, poverty among the female migrant workers within the Lagos hospitality sector, particularly in the food and beverage sector. Now, no matter how well they work, regardless of the duration of years that they have worked, regardless of what impact they have made, they do not get into the position of prestige. Anytime there is a need to get into a position of prestige, perhaps in managerial position or so, these foreign investors will go to their country and bring in people who are not as skilled, who are not as brilliant, who are not even capable, and as they come, they give them all kinds of incentives. They live in choice areas, they are paid in foreign currencies, they have all the infrastructure that you could imagine. But this is not the typical reality when it comes to the indigenous female migrants. Now, I will leave you with this question. Number one, from interview, I found that the life experience of this female migrants is nuanced. Some of them have made it so well. They've had connections and they have made some good ones. But there are some that are in stark poverty. They are responsible for their family and for their children. Some of them have children, they are not yet married, but they have children that are they are responsible for. Now, these people are in stark poverty because a number of them don't have the opportunity to interact with customers. So how do you expect them to depend on things that is not even certain? That is one. Another thing is that, of course, these foreign investors have done well. They tried to create jobs that we have failed to create. But the truth is that we can't depend on a GDP that favors the economy of the nation and lead the indigenous people to keep on struggling. Then to conclude, there was a time I had an interaction somewhere we began to talk about politics, and somebody mentioned, as we were having the argument, he said a certain person should come in as president. That when he comes in, he's a good man. That if I know him one-on-one, he will change my life. And I began to interact with this man in his 60s, and I mentioned to him that how do we describe an economy where the whole of an average citizen is dependent on having a one-on-one relationship with the leaders? How do we describe the life that people who do not have that opportunity, how do we describe the quality of their life?
I'm sorry,
sorry, let me conclude. And lastly,
we need to round up.
This hospitality industry, how do we bring these people to attain upward mobility? How can they achieve their aim and get a better life, even without all of these negative things that is happening around them? So these are some of the questions that are yet to be answered. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ruth Abraham, that was really interesting. Because of our time, can we have Miss Stella will come in now? Are you everything set now? So, please, because of our time, please.
Okay, so our PowerPoint came in already, but it's still remaining about 2% for it to finish loading. So I don't know, I'll just move on to the next person. Did you get that? It's further down. Yeah, so okay, so our PowerPoint is in what's remaining 1% to finish loading here before I can send it to the laptop. This is ready. Our PowerPoint is not ready. It's remaining 1%.
So what I'm getting is, our PowerPoint is not.
Okay.
So because we don't have so much time. So because we don't have so much time, do we have anybody between Mr. Babajide Oluwase and Ms. Nelly Chris who is ready with their presentation so that we can go ahead? Have anybody who is ready to go while we wait for Stella to?
Yeah, sure. I can just go.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So, and I think Stella can come after Mr. Babajide's presentation. So I think you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. So I just sent a request. Enable me to share my screen.
Okay. So as soon as you start speaking, I will start the timer. Please let's limit the presentation to about 12 minutes so that we have at least 15 minutes to sort of take questions from the audience.
Yes, please confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Presenting, my name is Babajide Oluwase. I'm an urban manager. Presenting from the city of Lagos, Nigeria. And I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to be sharing my thoughts around this topic, co-production and community engagements, rethinking infrastructure development in Nigerian cities. So this is contributing to the interdisciplinary perspective on infrastructure studies in Africa. Yes, this is the outline of what the presentation would focus on. I mean, yes, you could see a number of slides, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get through them in no time. So first, going through the background of study, understanding what co-production means, engagement, community engagement, so what it is beyond consultation. We'd also look at Lagos as a case study. There's the invisible hand of exclusion. We look at neoliberal reflections as far as infrastructure is concerned. We look at the strengths of co-production, and then we look at the gaps. Rethinking the role of government, we'll also be looking at that, and then some recommendation, and then we close. So yes, the background to the study it's really speaking about centered around infrastructure and helping us understand that infrastructure is more than just concrete and steels, as many people know it. It encodes identity, power, access, and survival, as well as even thriving in the city. In Nigeria, the states usually are very limited in terms of capacity and resources, right? And this has made room for the informal actors, particularly in low-income areas, for them to become builders and maintainers of critical infrastructures to get cities to work, right? And then we have an example of some of these typical activities within our city. So if you look at somewhere in Alimosho, where residents comes together and they self-fund activities like patching roads after a rainy season washout, or coming together, contributing efforts to clear drainages in preparation for heavy rainfall. I'm sure we might be able to relate with some of these activities within our communities. So co-production, what does it really mean? It's really about people, citizens, actors, state actors, and even non-state actors coming together to contribute toward public services, right? And ultimately, it's about active city building within the city. So think about the community electrification initiatives in the rural area, or people coming together to fund vigilante groups to provide security within a certain gated community. These are some of the joint effort that comes together to help in describing what co-production is all about. Community engagement beyond consultation. I'm sure many of us as researchers are privy to how it is when we talk about stakeholders engagement, stakeholders meeting. But what we do have in most cases is just people coming together to, in form of tokenism, right? To say, yes, we interacted with the people, but are their interests, are their thoughts, are they really factored into the plans that they are being invited to contribute to? I'll leave that question for us to answer eventually. And then Lagos has a case study. Lagos is that main pace that's a mega city with very big ambition. Yes, when you look at the way of life and how we do things, it's largely very much decentralized, informal. From the waste sector, yes, the government have its own efforts in terms of waste collection. There's also a lot of informal setup in terms of how waste is being collected. Look at water supply. Mostly individuals, households get to burn how they get water for themselves to get about their daily living. Interestingly, for a mega city like ours, right? And then I'll sort of draw one very recent example. It's a water component of the Ajegunle Korodu Resilience Action Plan, right? This sort of brought together state actors from the Lagos State Water Corporation, the LCDA for Agboike to Water Aid, which is an international NGO working in the water space, as well as community-led water management committee, which is made up of people within that Agboike community. They came together to drive a water project within that community. And then we look at what are the invisible hand of exclusion in a bid to drive development, right? In a city like Lagos, right? Building houses, highways, estates, a lot of waterfront reclamation. There's also displacement that are happening, right, across communities. One example that probably come close to mind is the case of Lekki Epe and expansion of Oturugba made demolition, right? From the lecture axis about talking about development, uplifting the corridor of Lagos, but also on the other hand, for the Oturugba residents, it's about housing as an infrastructure in the city. A bit of reflection into historicals around how our development pattern has been over the years. Starting from the colonial urban grid of the George Cadbury era to the post-independent planning to the 2000 PPP boom, which we've seen for a place like Eco Atlantic City, to even the Lekki Free Trade Zone development. And we see the implication of that in the lives of everyday people in Lagos. And then we are in the era of community-enabled infrastructure, which is largely driven by the likes of the World Bank, the United Nations, or United Nations Habitat, and the likes, trying to ensure accessibility for a lot of people. So for co-production, what are the strengths, right? Co-production brings about flexibility. It brings about local accountability because people must find ways to work together. People must understand their ideas and their intent. It also brings about leveraging resources from different actors, different stakeholders to achieve a common goal. Then lastly, it's about ownership, right? Whether it's from the government side, the community side, the NGO side, everyone sort of own and understand the goal that is meant to be achieved as far as the project is concerned. And so what does the circle typically looks like? You identify a problem, you organize people around it and actors, you mobilize the resources that you need to be able to address those concerns, you swing to action, and then you also can put maybe systems in place for maintaining what has been put in place. So yeah, as interesting as co-production sounds, I mean, what are the gaps, right? First is about, it's largely based on trust, right? Trust, shared incentives, and very clear rules for the different actors. But we've seen these trust issues get breached over time. And from one of the research that we did recently, trust breakdown, it's the biggest part of why co-production is failing, right? And next is about the poor maintenance culture of interventions or projects or infrastructure that have been put in place. And the final bit is the elite capture, right, which we've seen across myriads of projects, not just in Lagos, but across Nigeria. Now, we understand that government plays a critical role in driving this co-production efforts, right, across board. So what then do government need to start thinking about? Government can't do everything. We quite understand that, but they can do things to enable these actors and stakeholders to come together to do things. First, recognizing the community, the roles that community actors play, providing them the legal framework for them to thrive, and providing the technical support as well as financing to drive their efforts. And this is a typical flow for Lagos, right? Which I believe other states across Nigeria or even across Africa can learn, right? From the state government side to the local council, to the community development council, community development association, down to the traditional council. And every of these stakeholders at this point play a critical point that helps in achieving co-production eventually in our cities. So I'll leave you with these recommendations, right? We need to recognize informal actors in infrastructure policy, like not just for the sake of tokenism or mentioning them, but playing critical parts in that mix. We need to embed co-creation in procurement and design stages. So not just when we want to understand problem and then afterwards we leave them, but involving them even to the point of executing the different projects that have been collectively designed. We need to decentralize infrastructure designs, top down, right? But in this case, bottom up, right? Ensuring that, yes, ideas are collated at the local level, it sort of moved to the next leadership point in that cadre, and ultimately everyone have a role to play in achieving that common goal as far as infrastructure is concerned. And finally, it's about, I mean, we have a lot of interesting projects that we get to develop infrastructure in place, but what happens to them over a period of time? I mean, we've seen again and again that the quality sort of and effectiveness washes away over time and they get to be useless, right? So maintenance needs to be central to the different infrastructure that we get to put in place for better well-being of the people. And one of the ideas that I suggested here is how about embedding what we call a community co-production grants in state budget, local government budgets, even community development association budgets. We believe this would help in starting to build the maintenance culture that we see really lacks, not just in Nigeria, but across many parts of Africa. Yes, thank you. In conclusion, Nigerian cities are waiting for perfect plans. They are not waiting for perfect plans, actually. Our communities are already shaping infrastructure, which are often invisible. Our job as researchers and advocates is to spotlight, support, and scale the efforts that we've seen to be effective. And I'll leave you with this quote, right? A participatory city isn't just built differently, it feels differently. And I hope we all come together to achieve that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajide, for that incredible minutes. Abraham gave us a couple of minutes ago. Those are very fascinating ideas that you've both presented. So I was wondering if Miss Stella is ready for us now.
Yes, she's ready. Babajide, could you please stop
Okay,
sharing?
yes. What did you say?
Could you please stop sharing your screen?
Oh, but Babajide, can you stop sharing your screen?
Well, I stopped sharing my screen already.
Okay.
Then I saw that my video has been disabled. I think the moderator does not want me to show my fine face.
Mr. Babajide's video has been disabled. If we can just work on that, please. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I will start your time now, Stella. And can you see me on the screen, please?
Yeah.
So I try to private message people who are on Zoom privately to let them know about their time. But since you are in person, I will just try to cut in to say, hey, you have 5 minutes more. I'm very sorry to, maybe disrupt your thoughts, but just for us to be able to manage the time.
That's cool.
What? So
yeah. Oh. Okay. My name is Erika. I'm a second year PhD student at Brown University. PhD of anthropology. And my topic is precarious grounds, memories of flooding, infrastructural deficiencies, and institutional responses in Ibadan urban landscape. And just to give context to this picture, because I know you are thinking flooding and thinking infrastructure, and thinking this picture, like what's it doing here? So I've been in the archive, and I got this picture from a flooding that happened in one of the magazines for a flooding that happened in 1978. And this was basically a woman who had lost everything that she owned to the flooding. And this was literally her reaction captured live in the magazine. Next. And so just trying to define what flooding is, or say like the effect or impact, because so many scholars have done that already. But just quickly flow. Flood is basically where there is an overflow of water submerging the land that is usually dry. And when I'm talking about submersion this time around, I'm talking about in terms of this destruction, because it's not just the land, but oftentimes properties, lives, and things like that. And why Ibadan? So over the years, Ibadan, in fact, from some of these archival materials that I got from the archive, you see that Ibadan seems to have that name tag of city of flood. Because usually, if I ask you which flood you know in Ibadan, you probably tell me the 1980 flood. That seems like our own Katrina, New Orleans Katrina that happened in Nigeria. And so this is why I took Ibadan as my case study. So for many scholars have looked at flooding. Well, some still try to look at contemporary floods, but I'm very interested in past floods. And for me, it just really works, because I mean, if Ibadan is having if we have our own Katrina in Ibadan, and it's so historical, it's so far in 1980, over 40 years ago, and then I'm into the archive, and I see that we even had more devastating floods before 1980. And so for me, Ibadan just like my perfect study area to go to. And so again, like I said, studies have been done, and that's what I focus on the impact or the effect of flooding, because so many studies have been done on that already. And in these studies, you usually see that when they're talking about the effect of flooding, it's usually natural versus man-made. There is this natural effect that obviously as anthropologists can debate what is natural or what is not. But in this sense, when they talk about natural, they're talking about high precipitation, that the rainfall and also the landscape, generally the landscape of Ibadan, how it is structured, and also the soil. So people will tell you that Ibadan is mostly rocky, and it's also not just low level, it's like hilly. So all of this combined together actually influence us. But there's also this man-made effects. What people like to say, we humans as agents in causing floods, and basically with waste disposal. People have probably heard, people always hear Ibadan is the dirtiest place. There's just that rumor going around. So Ibadan obviously has a dirty problem, has a waste disposal problem, but there's also the housing problem where people just, I don't know if you've been to Ibadan, but you see the houses, and the houses being built as they are, you see that there are lack of drainages. So all of this combined, human factor and natural agents, have, pushed flooding or had led to the recurrence of flooding in Ibadan. Next slide. And so I think at this point, I really need to mention that I'm still currently on field, and I came from field here. So these are some of the questions that I am actually seeking to answer. How do residents of Ibadan remember and make sense of past flooding events? And flood in Ibadan is not recurring as it used to be due to some of the infrastructure we're going to see later on. But I'm very interested in how people remember, why they choose to remember, and how these memories help them to reorganize their lives in this contemporary time. I'm also looking at the roles infrastructural deficiencies play in the recurrence and severity of flooding in Ibadan. So yes, I mentioned that flood is not as frequent as it used to be, but from my research, 3 weeks of field now, I'm seeing that even though one side is saying, oh, flood, we don't have floods in Ibadan no more. The other side is saying, well, we still have floods here. So I'm also seeing how infrastructural deficiencies have added that over time. And then what has been the institutional response? What has been the local responses, national responses, and international responses, and how have all of these combined together shaped recovery processes in different communities? And the last question I'm also going to answer is, in what ways memories of flooding actually inform current land use decisions and disaster preparedness practices among affected communities in Ibadan? Next slide. So just to give context, this is a kind of historical table that shows flooding in Ibadan. Like we all know, we had a data problem in Nigeria, and so when you're thinking, when I went into the archive or when I was even interviewing some of my very elderly interlocutors, and like 88, 89, some of them 90, and they're telling that, oh, we used to have floods before 1980, and I got very curious, and I told myself that I needed to get into the archive, and so I went into the archive, and I realized that we have floods as far back as 1981. Right, but the data there is just it's very scarce. So when you're looking for more documented floods, you start from the 1980, and that's why you see from this table, from the 1980 floods, you see more specific figures given to floods. Next slide. So my method, I'm an anthropologist. My primary method is ethnography, and I think I also need to mention that please watch these pictures closely. Many of these pictures, all of these pictures, I actually took myself, including this. But I need you guys to watch the flow of pictures because I'm going to just that to sort of conclude what I'm saying. So my methodology is ethnography, and over the past weeks, and even previously my undergraduate, when I was doing my undergraduate research, I basically did in-depth interviews. But right now, I'm also including archival research as some of the pictures you're already seeing. And many of my interlocutors are particularly in victims, or you can also debate who victims are, but I like to say members of communities where flooding has occurred, churches that have been affected. Basically, for me, every area in Ibadan that I can hear that flooding happens in this area, I'm going there, trying to pick out specific areas of flooding. And so far, my free time has been Agbowo, Ogunpa, Ele, over the next 1 month, I'm also going to Odono and some other places that I cover. Next slide, please. So because I'm an anthropologist, I thought it was very important for me to actually put an ethnographic excerpt from one of the interviews that I conducted a few weeks ago. I'm not going to read it because this basically is like the basis for so many things I'm going to be talking about. So it says, I asked him, what helped the government render after the devastation of the flood caused to? He said, nothing. They gave us a grinding machine and 5 kg semo. He paused a bit as if to remember the exact incentive. At this moment, he wanted to remember the exact brand of semo. And then he came to and said, semolina. And then he said, they brought a house key, took picture with us, and the key, I think they were giving us the house. Then they collected the key back, and that was it. Bunch of fools. That's what they are. And I can say it to their Facebook. Then I asked them, up till now, they've not come back. He said, only we'll see them tomorrow. If you translate it to Yoruba, you probably get it better. Up till now, I'm still feeling the effects of my loss. I am yet to recover. And so this aspect, I keep living with flood. Memories.
About 4 minutes more, please.
Yes.
So flood beyond events. So something that really caught my attention while I'm on field is the fact that we often talk about flood in events, but I'm interviewing many of these people who had direct impact from flood, and you're seeing that yes, the event is done, but they are still living in the floods because the memories of what happened in the past still sticks to them so much. I'm also looking at memories of state failed from this excess, where you have many of my interlocutors saying, oh, the government said they will come, only if you see them tomorrow. Or you have someone, even from the 1980 flood, said, oh, that some people offered assistance, gave some amount of money to the Oyo State government, but up to today, they are yet to see the money. So you have these promises, memories of failed state promises. And something my research is also revealing to me is that different memories exist. So now I'm trying to also draw that distinction. The memories of people who were directly affected is quite different from those who were not directly affected, but maybe they had people who were directly affected. And so you can see it in the emotions, like when they are talking or when they are relating to you. Next slide, please. Again. So why infrastructure? So why infrastructure? Infrastructure basically are essential technologies. But again, I mean, so many scholars have, argued this. This is beyond just what we are saying. Just you have Latin arguing that it's social, you have and all these people arguing that it's social. And because infrastructure is so important, I forgot that this is somewhere I really want to focus on and see people's relation to it, or people's relation to past infrastructure and how they've got their life around current funds. Next slide. And so in making an making of infrastructure, so basically I'm looking at how the destruction of infrastructure by flood, but I'm also looking at those who had personal ties to this infrastructure, like their homes, water access, and things like that. That's an aspect I'm looking at. But I'm also looking at infrastructures of the state. What has the state provided for these people? What infrastructure has the state provided to cater for flood till this current time? Next slide. And so some of the institutional responses so far that I've got is this.
Yeah, please, let's round up.
What? Okay. The internationalization project. So the internationalization project, like I've discovered, actually it started from the time of Bola in the 1980s. But over the years, they've gotten got support from the World Bank around $200 million, and the project was in 3 phases: the drainage master plan, the solid waste master plan, and the early flood warning system. And all of this combined. Well, the project ended last year, but something that my research has revealed is that they said the project ended, but physically and from the voices of my interlocutors, I'm seeing that the project is not ended. Next slide. I did have some materials to match that. Next slide. And so this picture right here is one of the drainage channelization projects made by Oyo State. And maybe I'll just round up. When you look at the channelization project, you still see that waste is being dumped into the channelization project, into the channels, or that's what I call them, the channels. And so you still have these channels, but you have waste in the channels. And my interlocutors tell me that, the channels we made, they have a period of 100 years. And if one pertinent question I ask myself is, well, if they have a return period of 100 years, and this is 2025, this is barely how many years after channels were made, and they're looking at this already. What exactly, how many is 100 years return period a feasible thing to expect? And these are also some of the infrastructures that they came up with. Then community responses. So what has been community responses to the government institute? Well, I tried to when I say all the states, what has been their responses? So many of them in this place, you feel that this is not as dirty as that. So this was taken in LALA. And what LALA people did was they made sure that nobody you can't dump dirt into this place. They are very, very strict about it. So that's something that as a community they've led to do. Some of them go next like this. Some of them also have self-made strategies, like this woman here in front of our shop. the government used to do drainages and she took it upon herself to do it. But you also see this very funny statement, yeah, that electricity goes from tomo. That's basically, if you put that here, you're going to be unfortunate to your generation. And this is basically just against waste disposal because that's one of the major problems of flooding in Ibadan. Next slide, please.
Please, I think you need to round up now, Stella.
Okay. Yeah, so immediately open. What I'm going to look at my pictures. You see that I started with pictures, and then this is my conclusion. I started with pictures that were black and white, and gradually I moved to pictures that were colored. And what I'm trying, or what I'm seeing on field now is that when you think about memories, you tend to think about the past. But people who are victims, direct victims, or who have to always struggle with infrastructural deficiencies, or who have memories of the direct memories of infrastructural deficiencies, it's hard for them to distinguish the past from the present. And that's why I bring these pictures together. I said black and white, but I ended up color. Because even today, even though you say, oh, it's memories of flooding, and maybe flooding is not happening as much, in this current time, the people who live those memories, for them, they still live with flooding. And I think that's where I end, that the flood is still flooding.
All right. Thank you so much for that very wonderful presentation. Thanks to everyone that has spoken so far. So without wasting our time, because I want to be sure that we have enough time for questions and answers from the audience. Are you ready to present your work, please?
Yes, I'm very ready to present my work.
Yeah,
but
so
I want to confirm that everyone can hear
please
me.
limit your presentation to 12 minutes so that we have enough time. And then
Awesome, I can help with that.
yeah.
I just wanted to say that was like a very amazing presentation, Stella, Babajide, and Miss Ruth. My name is Nelly Chris Jamaka Omionu, and I am a PhD student in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Connecticut. And today I will be speaking to you about sickle cell disease and healthcare disparities, a review of gaps in management structures and strategies in Nigeria amidst global management advancement. And I just wanted to mention that today is World Sickle Cell Day. Just trying to create awareness, be kind to people living with sickle cell. This is my presentation agenda. So I am going to begin this presentation with a brief background on sickle cell disease, asking what is sickle cell disease and emphasizing why Nigeria, with one of the highest rates of SCD globally, must be central in conversations around care equity and global health priorities. Next, I get to trace the evolution of biomedical management strategies. While these breakthroughs are celebrated globally, I get to ask, what happens when these innovations don't reach the people who need them most? Then thirdly, I'll examine the availability of infrastructure. But more than that, I get to question the politics of access. Who can afford care, where is care available, and what does it mean when care is treated as a commodity? And fourth, we'll get to explore the interplay of sociocultural and structural factors that shape people's health-seeking behavior. And finally, I'll close with recommendations that are rooted in equity, policies, and accountability. So what is sickle cell disease? Sickle cell disease is not a new concept, but it is a genetic condition that affects the shape and functions of the red blood cells. Now, normally, your red blood cells are supposed to be round and flexible, and they're supposed to carry oxygen throughout your bloodstream. But in persons living with sickle cell disease, they take on a sickle or crescent shape, and these sickled cells block blood flow. They lead to pain. They lead to severe anemia. They lead to infections, organ damages.
Excuse me. Sorry just to be sure.
I'm going to try again.
Okay. Yes, great.
Awesome. I am so sorry for that. So I'm just going to continue from here. So this is what the normal red blood cells look like, and this is what a sickled cell looks like. And I was saying that when it's sickled, it blocks blood flow, it leads to pain, it leads to anemia, it leads to infection, organ damages, and ultimately death. So globally, around 7.7 million people live with this disease, but the burden of this disease is not equally distributed, as Nigeria alone accounts for 5 million people, and it has the highest national burden in the world. And even more alarming is the fact that we have about 150,000 beds annually in Nigeria. And as I mentioned, SCD is not a new condition. want to start the sickle cell disease management, and basically to reinforce the fact that sickle cell disease management has, you know, it's been a long time coming. And so it was first clinically described in 1910 when a physician named James Herrick discovered the sickle-shaped red blood cells in a patient with severe anemia. And then by the year 1949, we have Linus Pauling, who identified it as the first molecular disease and linking the condition to a specific mutation in the hemoglobin gene. And by the 1970s and 1980s, we see the emergence of basic management strategies like blood transfusions, penicillin prophylaxis to prevent infections, and early childhood screening. And, you know, these strategies have significantly improved survival rates, but only in countries that can implement them. And then by the late 1990s and early 2000s, we see the introduction of hydroxyurea, which is a disease modifying therapy. And it simply helps in the production of fetal hemoglobin, which we only get as infants. So it helps in this reproduction. And when it does that, it means that there's a reduction in pain crisis and also a reduction in the need for transfusion. And more recently, we've seen remarkable breakthroughs and innovations in terms of bone marrow transplants. We've seen gene therapy, gene edit techniques, CRISPR, and targeted pharmaceuticals like the voxelector and the L-glutamine. But here's the problem. While these innovations signal hope and progress, they have not translated into equitable access, you know, especially in countries like Nigeria. Many people living with SCD still lack access to routine screening, to hydroxyurea, and transfusion infrastructure, let alone the advanced therapies. And so the big question here is remains so limited. It's about policy. What does it tell us about power, about the political economy of health? Now, moving on. While the global landscape of sickle cell disease management continues to evolve with these therapies, the conversation in Nigeria still has to begin with the more basic question of who has access and why. Because there are serious infrastructural gaps in Nigeria's health system. Most public hospitals do not have diagnostic tools. Hydroxyurea is still inconsistently unavailable. There's a divide between specialist care in urban centers and rural area. This leads to a sort of like divide between the urban and the rural, the private and the public, and the rich and the poor patients. And I'd like to mention that at a recent panel on sickle cell disease in Nigeria, we had speakers like Professor Fumi Olopade, who emphasized that science must be shaped by the ecosystem in which it innovates for. It's about building infrastructures, it's just about building labs, but it's about a synergy between these health insurance, personnel's consumable, all within a health system that understands the genetic, the economic and social context of the population it is meant to serve. And one quote that particularly resonated with me was that innovation is negative. And it also, you know, vice versa, equity without innovation is also negative. That is the crux of the issue in my presentation. Afford to frame the lack of access as individual problem alone. I believe it is deeply structural. And when access is tied to purchasing power, we're looking at a development crisis and not a medical one. So in this present arguing that infrastructure is not neutral. It's not an independent actor. It reflects whose lives are prioritized, whose health is funded, who holds the power to shape futures, and that are not defined by pain or untimely deaths. My next slide is about sociocultural and structural factors that influences people's health-seeking behavior. So this image I found on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's website, and it shows that these individuals, as individuals, we do not exist independently. We have our education, we have our family. Some more important to fully understand how people access care for SCD, we have to look beyond the clinic and ask what shapes health at a structural level. So Nigeria's health system is deeply pluralistic. Medical care exists alongside traditional medicine, faith-based healings, and spiritual explanations of healings, of illness and healing. And so I'm saying that for many people living with SCD, these systems are not mutually exclusive or independent. Health seeking behavior is shaped by more than just knowledge. It is influenced by stigma, distrust, or religious interpretations of suffering, or what it means to be well or healthy. So these cultural structures are influenced deeply by inequality. And so when care is unaffordable, when drugs are scarce, when public hospitals are underfunded, people turn to what is affordable, what is accessible. Complex reality can be understood through logic alone. And as an anthropologist, I'm saying that to everyone listening and to other anthropology, we do not just see health as just of economy, of politics, and meaning. And so it becomes important to understand this interplay, especially if we want to design interventions that actually reach the people that they are meant to serve. Moving on. Can there be a synergy in Nigeria's health structure? This question is an invitation that I'm not simply critiquing what isn't working, but I'm trying to ask what could be possible if we design a health structure that reflects how people actually live, how people actually heal, and how people actually survive in Nigeria, because you need to survive. And for people living with SCD, they have to move between the systems, not because they're confused, but because this is what their survival requires. Yeah, but the health systems as it stands is fragmented, and so this moment calls for what I'd like to call a synergy. To make, especially considering justice in policy, in inclusions, and the lived realities of persons living with sickle cell. So, towards equity in SCD care, policy and practice recommendations. So, I've intentionally made my recommendations to be policy facing because I I think it should be aimed at reshaping not only how care is delivered, but how healthcare is governed in Nigeria. First, I believe that Nigeria needs to strengthen its public health infrastructure with specific focus on neonatal screening policies, especially on sickle cell disease. This can include targeted investments in diagnostics, in drug access, in transfusion services, and workforce employee development, especially in under-resourced areas. Secondly, I believe that the government needs to move beyond tolerance to pluralism, tolerance of pluralism to intentional engagement. This is because the faith-based healings, the traditional healing practices, and the biomedical healing structures they already exist. Okay, they are already like central actors to care for the people in this country. And this means that policy needs to reflect their reality. I also believe that my third recommendation would be that there should be financial protection for people living with sickle cell disease and the treatment that they want to have access to, especially in Nigeria's national health insurance scheme, ensuring that no one is excluded or no one, nobody does lacks access to healthcare due to the cost. And finally, I believe that everything targeted towards health governance needs to be held within a right-based policy approach, one that sees health as a public good, and this means embedding accountability mechanisms and ensuring that policy reaches the people that it is meant to serve. And to conclude this presentation, I have argued that technological advancement alone is not enough to address the realities of people living with sickle cell disease or what it means to live with sickle cell disease in Nigeria. I found this quote, or I got this quote of the sickle cell disease panel that was held last week, and it was shared once again by Professor Fumi Olopade from the University of Chicago. And she's reminding us that, technical solutions already exist, but what is missing is the political will, the policy alignment to make them all accessible. And these gaps are not simply due to scientific failures. They are the outcomes of policy neglect, of underfunding, and structural exclusion. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Miss Nelly Chris. Those were very, very fascinating presentations from all our panelists. So right now, it is time for questions and answers. I have my own questions, but I wanted to be sure that members of the audience have the opportunity to ask the panelists their questions. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A box here. The first one is for Babajide, and that is from Dr. Ololajulo. How does coal production fit into gentrification and urban renewal campaigns that structurally disempower the poor? That is for Babajide. For Stella, Ogunpa channelization is a huge infrastructure that has addressed perennial flooding in Ibadan. How do people living close to the river channel make sense of this project, the Ogunpa channelization infrastructure? And for Nelly Chris, beyond medical infrastructure, how does guilt constitute an infrastructure that impacts access to healthcare? So I believe those are the questions in the chat box for now. But the way we will go about it is that I will want the audience to ask their questions. Do we have anybody who has any questions amongst the audience in the room? If you could just take the microphone to ask your questions. We'll collect all the questions for the panelists, and then before the end of the session, panelists will have about 2 minutes each to respond to those questions. Do we have any questions in the room? Yeah, and please be brief with the question because we are running out of time.
First question.
Okay, I have this.
No, then let him go.
And please say the person you are directing your question to. Please mention the person you are directing the question to. Yeah.
Oh, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Stella, I actually spoke to our memory. So one thing that is, I did open up how do you describe memory? I talking about individual memory, collective memory, or both. Because the daily of responding to identity machine are putting your God. So how do you write memory? Something like that.
So the second person.
So, Stella, I have this question. And I want you to justify the choice of 3 areas that you focus on. Why do you exclude the other areas? We know there are many areas in that are affected. We chose to justify if you want to do that. Then for Ruth, I have this question. The inequality you're talking about is indigenous female workers versus foreign female workers, or male workers versus female indigenous workers. So I want to understand the inequality you're talking about. The female, foreign female workers versus indigenous female workers, or male versus migrant female workers versus female migrant workers. Then lastly, I also want to ask you, are you suggesting conclusively that the hospitality firms that are involved in these practices should back up? Since you mentioned that that it's no better to have a high GDP whereas people are suffering. So what's the solution that you're bringing to the table? Are you saying that it should just happen?
Okay, so thank you all the presenters. Yeah, thank you all for the silent presentation. So my question also goes to it. Well, more like an observation. Would you also try to look at specific, when you say those working in hands, at what level dependent? And you also made mention of the managerial positions, why they should be bringing their own people at the point of emphasis. And they are also indigenous or Nigerians who also are doing the managerial positions. Then for Babajide, do you also think that in terms of designing projects, that we talked about stakeholders engagement. We think that in the design of this project, that we carry along for beneficiaries, when the design is being done, even with international agencies that also sponsor or fund some of these projects.
Okay, so yes. So
Okay, so I'll say good presentation from all the friends, and this is actually a very interesting panel. But I want to pay for it because really competent. So my point is that in your literature review, it's more like in your literature review, the first of 2011, it was there was a particular issue about the University of Ibadan. University of Ibadan is in the late sports in the past. There are a new project about following. So in 2011, we also 2011 the University of Ibadan. I think I know because the university do was almost wiping, and there are a lot of issues, there are lots of infrastructure that were defeated in the election following 2011. And in some heights, so many animals are wiping. Even though no demand was, so many animals are lost. And the cost was over $1 billion in just the election. So I believe that would reach your intention, reach it. Then for Mr. Babajide Oluwaseun, for I want to ask, don't you think that if government is sensitive about infrastructure reforms, government should have got into the common some community before the, because what we have most times is that people don't migrate to communities, they don't build houses, and this way they build houses in this village before government now come and try to put boundaries for them. But if government has got into community before people, government would have been able to identify them here on the market, stability on the street, before people now come and build their structure. Do you think this connects with recommendations for your work?
So we can take one more question because we want to give panelists. Okay, yeah, please be brief, please, so that they have enough time to respond. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Philip Luisa. I'm from Florida International University. First question is to Ruth. I love everybody's presentations. In terms of our work process line, so in terms of remediation and labor abuse, as we're saying specifically with female workers, is the abuse greater amongst expatriates, so like the Lebanese and the Chinese for African workers, or amongst fellow Africans for African workers as well? And then to Bangladesh, in terms of how you're speaking about co-production and the fragility of co-production, is in terms of strengthening it, would there be a better way, still looking for the government, still an internal way to strengthen it within the community as a source of strengthening it, so increasing the power of the trust economy?
Okay, so the last one.
Okay.
Congratulations to the presenters. Are you able to give us in-depth view of also you said that I'm showing this institution done the work. I want to ask, and this question goes to all the presenters, both those online and those in the past. I was expecting at which point each presenter was used to anything for the answer, let's go concentration to the arena. Particularly with close humans like going from me rooms. And I just saw your presentation where you made display of some pictures, Boha, and there has to be something there. I know I think I'm familiar with the absolute so I don't know, did you get the experience consent from the owner of the communication. So, if it's was if we about advance, if the public person answers the law in a way of that this to avoid some kind of falling away of some consent because currently the Nigerian research space is gradually taking progress research business. People are being more seriously. So that's you have to say what we should know. So we just come on against it's not trading issue. Or looking at the that should consent are really so worse about this is the
Thank you. So please, we need to give the panelists 2 minutes to quickly respond to those questions because we have barely 8 minutes. So please, 2 minutes. There will be a hard stop after 2 minutes so the other panelists can also respond to the questions. So, and we'll also go in the order in which the presentations were made. And if we can start with Miss Ruth Abraham, please, 2 minutes. I've started the timer.
Thank you very much. I'll just find a way of taking a response to it. Number one is the hospitality industry, the area that I'm focused on, that my research is essentially focused on, is the food and beverage. And one thing about this aspect of hospitality industry is that people learn on the job. So it doesn't require, for instance, it doesn't require any special skill. But when people work there and they are labored for years and years, they get to become experts, they get to become professionals. And you see, I've gone to the field, I've interacted with these people, and I've seen how people move off. Just like you mentioned, at what level? When people work for long there, they are supposed to get a promotion, they're supposed to get some kind of recognition. But whenever such an opportunity comes up, especially the Lebanese entrepreneurs, they would return to their home and bring in people. And in fact, even who have not really who have already had so much interactions with them. Once you see the kind of people they bring, even without interacting with them, you know these people are below our standard. And the reason, just like I mentioned, is because we have a laborious environment and there are lots of loopholes that these people take advantage of. That is what is happening. So it's not about what level, and you also mentioned, the gender. Yes, this research is essentially focused on female migrants. It's not that the males don't go through the same issues, but we just have to focus on the particular issue and particular gender. That is why I'm talking about the females in this research. Other people too go through their challenges. And you talked about the foreign entrepreneur.
Please, random.
Okay. That's just it. I don't know. Thank you. Thank you.
Just summarize your thoughts, please. Yeah.
I should summarize it. Yes.
Yeah, just in 20 seconds, please.
Well, to complete this whole thing, there is a need for a policy that would look into the operations of the hospitality industry such that people can have advantage as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can we move on to Mr. Babajide, please, in 2 minutes, because we want to be sure that everybody has time to respond to their question, to the questions they have. Please go ahead. I've started the timer for you.
Thank you. I think I find it a bit challenging hearing most of the questions. I'll respond to the first one on the Q&A bit here, which speaks to how does production fit into gentrification and urban renewal campaigns that structurally disempower the poor. So co-production, when it's done right, can serve as some sort of counterbalance to gentrification as we know it. Because what it then does is that it gives the people in these affected communities the real decision-making power, right? What we've seen happen times and times again is more of mere participation, or what we call tokenism, right? Just to check a box that we've interacted with the people that settled in that particular location. The key to whether community people involved are taken through the process of that urban renewal or gentrification process, it's important to ensure that they participate, right? They're involved, their concerns are heard, and whatever the execution plan becomes, that their interest and their voices reflect in that. When this is not ensured, then it's just a mere participation exercise. The other questions I had was around beneficiaries, right? In terms of how do we, I'm not sure I get the questions clearly, and I might not be able to do as much justice. But the question was saying, am I saying that beneficiaries must be involved in the entire process of designing and implementing the project? If that was the question, then it's absolutely yes, right? Because there's a lot of things that would also typically change from how the project or the idea is being designed, right? When we factor in the people, yes, if we need to maybe move the people away from where they've known to settle to a different location to allow for urban renewal exercise, for example, how then are we looking to relocate them? Relocating them in a way that is practical, relocating them in a way that does not cut them away from their typical usual way of life that their parents, their grandparents have been used to living their lives. Maybe the other questions we can share, maybe exchange via mails or via chat.
Yes.
And I'll
yes.
do well to respond to them.
Yes. So please, can Miss Stella just in 2 minutes, please? We are almost out of time.
So first question, how do people taking a lot of so in the fact, because like I said, I'm working in places. So if I'm coming from standardization, you do not have many houses. You just have, because they have clear resources, like I heard they have clear resources to make the channels. But if I'm coming towards Agoro and LLA and all those other places and where the channels were made, you hear people say you didn't like the channels that they were made. They're like, well, yes, but at least from what manner it was just like, well, this is just even a shabby job. So we're going to do it, you should have at least done it well, so that we know we'll not experience bits of flooding anymore. So I think it varies across different communities. And then second, how do I conceptualize them? So I'm conceptualizing actually an individual memories and collective memories. Because one thing I found out is that individual memories are different. The way people tend to remember them are different. But also in different communities, when you experience different floodings, you see that their experiences also tend to align. And so in some collective memory, that so I'm looking at both and lastly, why did I choose Nigerian? And in my presentation was there. I'm not just going to be areas. I'm also going to, like I said, I'm still going to Bodono, I'm still going to so many other places. And this is over like my PhD. I have 5 years. So I'm not in any hurry right now. And lastly, ethical consideration. Yes. We're from anthropology, you cannot do any human-based work without your IRB. I have my IRB, and yes, and people interview, many of the states I interviewed, I went like before I came to the state, IUFMB, like Oyo State Commission in the environment, and then some of them even giving maps, pictures, and things like that. So yes, I would say I have some ethical allowance.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Nelly Chris, without wasting time, in 2 minutes, can you please respond to the questions?
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Lolachilo, for your question. So beyond medical infrastructure, I believe that yields does constitute, has effects on infrastructure because I'd like to think about it from a perspective of field infrastructure. I've met interlocutors and informants who somehow did their genotype testing and somehow they got the wrong test and then they end up having children with sickle cell disease. And this puts like a sort of like guilt because you have to see your child go through unsufferable pain and it becomes difficult for them And then there's also like the sociocultural belief, and as a way of like managing that health condition, because you see people, like I'd mentioned, aside from like the biomedical infrastructures that are available, people end up going with what their culture, what they believe in culturally. So some people would rather go to prayer houses, or they'll go to like traditional healers, or some people have like a synergy or like a mix of both. But basically, it sort of like constitutes what works best. So for some people, they would not accept blood transfusion because it's against it's against their religion, and so it does affect the infrastructure that's on ground, and the plan for like better effective infrastructures. You'd also see people who want to manage. I want think about it as guilt as a form of management. So rather than express or describe your pain, people go on to like manage and deal with the pain instead of making use of the infrastructure or demanding for like policy changes or like effectiveness in the health infrastructure that is already on ground. And for Mr. Oluwabukumi, on your question, I already think that there's already like a national health insurance scheme for people living with sickle cell disease, but I just want to mention that it is also very limited because in terms of the medication that's available, in terms of the testing, and I also want to mention that NHIS is only available in institutions that are mostly found in the urban or peri-urban areas and not in very rural areas. So imagine, having a crisis in the middle of the night and having to journey an hour to get.
And so, yes, I'll bend on the last. Not very much. Thanks.
So, thank you. I think we are totally out of time now. I just want to thank everybody for being part of this panel. So if there are questions that were not addressed by the panelists, please feel free to send your questions to their email addresses listed in the program. Please, the email addresses of all the panelists are listed in the program of the LSA 2025. Thank you so much. This has been a very insightful, a very educative moment. And thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience for joining us. We have another part coming up tomorrow. I believe at 3:45 p.m. Yeah, so 3:45 p.m. Please join tomorrow as we continue our discussion about the nature of infrastructure.
Thank you. Bye.
Honestly, I'm taking it.